weekend. John and I, helping the boy Ian along between us, wouldn't know all that had happened. But Laddie, who knows his subject pretty well, had begun to piece the story into a kind of pattern. It was like many another, he said. The fellow on the stretcher, his name had been Barry, the waiting ambulance, the worn but ever so gentle helpers, the young man Ian, lucky still to be able to walk, let alone to be alive. And the three of us. Well, Blackie, the big man, seemed even more tired than John and me. He pulled himself into the ambulance to go off with the casualties to the hospital in his Highland hometown. We had an idea he'd stay with them until he knew the verdict and the whole story. They drove off. And then our eyes and our thoughts moved again to the high, wintry peaks of the West and the events leading up to the rescue.
And your age?
19.
Thank you.
Ever have here? How we come out after? All right, sister?
Yes, thank you, sir.
And how are you feeling?
I'm feeling a lot better now, thank you. But how's my friend?
Well, he's a little better. I can't be sure how things are going. A lot depends on him. We're hoping for the best. Have you known him long?
No, he was just telling me they met for the first time a couple of nights ago in the youth hostel.
I think we'll keep much the same pattern as we decided on previously, but we'll start off a bit further down this time.
I know this hostel well. It's a place favored by climbers and well run from that point of view, too. It was Friday night, as Lucky told us, and the boys were planning the day ahead.
What's the forecast for tomorrow, do you know?
It's fine for us. There's a lot more air frost, a little more snow, so there should be some good ice pitches above the snow line.
Yes, they should be pretty good, shouldn't they? You fellas climbing tomorrow?
Yes, but not here. We're going further north instead.
Oh, yeah? Mm-hmm. Well, it's getting late now. I think we ought to turn in for an early start in the morning. Good night. Well, are you coming? Okay.
Yep, okay, cool. Well, have a good trip.
All right. See you. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, hello, John. Thanks a lot.
Come from?
Yeah, I'm from Yorkshire.
Yorkshire? Oh,
Yeah.
from Lancashire myself. Have you done much climbing?
Well, I've done a bit in the Lake District, but mostly hill walking. What about you?
I've done quite a bit in North Wales. You fancy a rock climb tomorrow?
Oh, I wouldn't mind, really. I've got ice axe with me. I've got something.
I've got a rope.
Yeah?
Oh, we'll do that tomorrow then.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything more before I got the store, boys?
No, no thanks, no.
No? No, I don't think so.
Good
enough then.
Yeah,
Right on.
night.
Right.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
It was Good Friday night, in fact. Easter came early that year. I'd come over from Ireland to be in my Scottish hills again, with John up from England and Laffy down from the north. It looked like being a grand Easter, with a crispness over everything that Saturday morning. But we weren't the first on the go. My old pals of the RAF were out before us in the area, down over the rickety bridge that crosses the gorge, taking it easy to stop the whole thing collapsing. Then up over the other side on one of their exercises. A year ago, when I was with them, we expected trouble at Easter. The sergeant was pretty scathing. "You're forward, boys," he would say. "The hills are crawling with call-out material." He had a nasty habit of being dead right. But now, well, I was out of the mob and in good company. The three of us left our place at a more respectable hour. Early enough, all the same. We saw ourselves having a fine day, well equipped to enjoy the hills ahead of us.
Right, boys, wakey, wakey, wakey. Come along now, the sun's your eyes out. Bed's made up by 9 o'clock. I'm getting out.
As it turned out, at the hostel that Saturday morning, the experts and the energetic were up and about early, too. For one reason or another, most of them were moving. Hostlers are a bit like birds migrating in the spring. But two of the young English lads had slept on and had to be routed out for all their talk the night before. They'd scrambled their way through breakfast while the hostel emptied of their mates.
What time do you think we'll be back?
About tea time.
About tea time. Hello, boys. You all there?
Ah, yeah, we're
Hi,
not there.
where are you going?
Well, just over there.
You. Can you move?
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
still
we have.
Yeah.
What time are you going to be back? Oh, we should be back for about tea time, right? I see. Oh, well, good enough now. Look after yourself.
Yeah.
Time. Right, bye-bye.
I once thought of becoming a hostel warden. His responsibilities are heavy ones, a lot heavier than the boys were apparently carrying. Their gear, I suppose, was fair enough for a ramble, as they said they were going. Lightly clad and light of heart, they weren't looking for trouble this clear spring morning. Climbing's an intensely personal thing. At least I know it is for me. I got to know these hills when I was in the RAF. And always perhaps I was a little afraid of them. I was beating my own fears every time I climbed a mountain. That's what I mean by mountains being personal, and love of them being a great, difficult thing. But on a mountain itself, on a rock face like we were that Saturday, you're thinking of technique. John did nothing in haste. He looked well to each step. Balance was more than strength, and the light touch of hand on rock was part of our experience. By the back of 10, Lackey had led to a grass ledge. John had followed up the lower pitch, and it was my turn to see how it went. The forecast had been right about air frost. It was coldish for the time of year. Then, with John belayed to his satisfaction, off I went. It really wasn't at all bad, though the holes had been freezing to my fingers, even through mitts. There should certainly be good snow and ice further up. Now it was John's turn on the higher pitch. There's a bit of the alpine touch about John's climbing. Lucky man. I never been there myself. It must have been about this time, unknown to us, that the two lads started on the hill. Barry, the Lancashire boy, was obviously as tough as they come. No second wind for him. Ian, from Yorkshire, ice axe dangling loose and breath coming not so easily, wasn't going to be beaten. Now, this was what he'd come for, what all the books said, to go climbing with someone better than he was. There was nothing for it but to follow up and after him, loose stones and all. By 11, the three of us were beginning to enjoy the mountain. John took a photograph, and then over from us, about half a mile away, we saw two boys appear at the edge of the corrie. They stopped, knelt beside the burn to drink. Then, though we couldn't hear them, we saw them point up towards the buttresses over the corrie. We thought of calling them, but they wouldn't hear us beside the stream. And they left by the way they'd come. We continued our climb. By midday, we were on one of the buttresses above the corrie. Here we found a thin film of ice over the rock, very common on Scottish mountains in winter. I used a piton. I've known climbers here who don't hold with them, but I was glad of this bit of ironmongery all the same for making a running belay. The film of ice was slippery, caused by hard frost after mist or rain. Now it was warm in the sun, though bitter out of it in the wind, and we moved with caution. As Lahey came up, we felt we'd spent enough time on the rock if we were to see the summit and the view we'd earned. So we took to the gully with not too soft snow under our feet. As we climbed, the slope steepened, and the snow became older and harder until we were making steady progress up to the sun with ease. There was still no need of roping up, but at length the snow toughened and we had a long run of step cutting up the higher pitches of the gully. Then we got so high, we went into the shadow of the mountaintop. We came on our first true ice. This was very hard work, but you get into a kind of rhythm with practice, which helps. We cut our way over to the south buttress, and so onto the rock, clean and dry. The sun was burning and the day was fine. It had been a strenuous climb, but now we reckoned we had only another 400 feet or so to the summit. There, 3,700 feet up, we would eat and rest soon after 1 o'clock. But about now, as we had to learn later, 2 young men below us were heading for trouble. Their rope was a symbol of their actions, tangled. Put off by the prospect of the pinnacles, Barry led Ian off onto the flanking ridge. Barry, the leader, brash, confident, and unconcerned, was determined to make the top, and the ridge looked simple enough from where they were. Ian was so tired he was numb. He wished it could all end. But even more afraid of being left alone, he followed on. They say troubles come in threes, and they came that day. We climbed up, not into the sunshine we'd expected, but into cloud. Right away, the sun went in. We caught the wind above the ridge. It was terribly cold. We went on as best we could, feeling our way through the snow to the summit cairn. It was a great disappointment, but we wanted food and at least a short rest. The cairn would provide some shelter. We reached it later than we thought we would, and were glad to ease our loads. Plenty of food doesn't weigh much. We were all old enough hands at this game to know the value of it, especially in a day like this had been. We dug into substantial bread rolls. But even more than food, I wanted extra warmth, which every sensible climber carries. John was worried all of a sudden about the weather. He's got the eye of a mountain eagle for weather changes, and he didn't like the look of it. He said the Scottish weather was performing one of its Arctic tricks. He said, in fact, the sooner we were down to lower slopes, the better he would like it, and I couldn't disagree with him. Our meal finished quickly, we packed up and left the summit, keeping to the easy ridge by which we'd made our final approach. The time was just after 2 o'clock. We had 5 hours to darkness. By 3, we were out of the cloud and kicking our way down a gentle slope. It was colder, if anything. John had been right as usual. It would freeze hard tonight. It must have been about now that Barry watched Ian come up to the top. Neither of them had a watch, map, or compass. Ian was relieved that the ordeal was at least half over. He said he was past eating much, not that they had much with them for eating. We came to a good glissading slope. We had no idea of the argument a mile above us. Which way down, this gully or that gully? They didn't know. Ian said that one. They nearly parted company, then decided to keep together, down the wrong gully. By 4:30, we were in sight of the road. It had been a good day, and we'd done plenty. We abseiled over the nose of a ridge. It was 2 miles to home and tea. This was where we would wrap it up. I could smell the fresh scones and taste the farm butter, and I felt somehow we'd earned it, for the momentary twinges the mountain had given us. As I pulled the rope through, I thought, that's one of the pleasures of climbing. I glanced at my watch. 4:40.
Did you get any good snaps today, John?
Oh, yes, I think so, Lucky. The light was pretty good, up on the ridge there.
Yes, the ridge on the right, was it?
Aye, that's right. That's where I got that.
We were talking after dinner when the maid came in.
Well, why don't you take a phone call from the youth hostel, please?
It may be the Irish in me, but I had a premonition. So I think I'd lucky. I sat wondering, looking at nothing in particular. What could the youth hostel want? It sounded like trouble.
Yes, yes, that sounds like the two we saw today. Well, there are 3 of us here. We'll take the first aid gear and go up and see what we can do now. And you'll get the police, will you? Righto then. We'll be off now.
We got our answer all right when John came back. Yes, it must be those 2 we'd seen drinking by the stream. Oddly enough, the hostel's got no climbers staying tonight. That means it's us. Yes, it does. You think they'll be in Twisting Gully? Aye, as like as not, that's where they'll be. Just as well we've eaten, we'd best get weaving.
When did your party leave?
About 9:30, Inspector.
They should be about the lower Corrie now.
Yes, it should be mine, sir.
How long did the last party take from Stop Corrie?
Round about 6 hours.
Well, we'll give them till about 3 o'clock in the morning. If they're not back then, we'll call out the RAF. I'll alert the Treaty. Will you send a car to the RAF camp and let them know there?
Very good, Inspector. But I was thinking there's a dance in the town hall tonight, and perhaps some of the RAF chaps will be there. What do you say if I send a man along to see you?
Yes, okay. Would you give me the RAF at the Treaty, please?
We were glad of Lackey's local knowledge all right that night. I'd done night searches in the RAF, and I had no particular affection for freezing mountains at dead of night. 2 rucksacks with first aid gear and not much light to see by in this perishing place. We'd circled the floor of the quarry and begun the ascent to the gullies. There must have been a lot of cloud about. We hadn't had a sight of the Easter moon. Every piece of rock had that thin film of ice on it. We could see precious little of our surroundings, but I could feel their presence. Shouts had produced no answer. Then, somehow, I don't know how, Lackey's torch picked out a find, an ice axe lying just below the gully proper. We prayed it might not have fallen so very far. The time was nearly 1 o'clock. We moved up and over an outlier of the pinnacles that made this gully not only difficult, but dangerous at the best of times. And then we saw them, the 2 boys, in the darkness of that deadly place. It might have been the Himalaya and the Arctic frozen into one. The time was 1:10 Miraculously, they were alive. The young were, in fact, though terribly shocked, seemed to have escaped even broken bones. A foot was badly frostbitten. The other fellow was unconscious. Ian had thought he was dead. The great thing was to get him warm. With a ground sheet and a blanket on the snow, we lifted him carefully. Then John, the medico among us, looked for his injuries. John was worried about internal injuries, but he didn't want to uncover the chap. His broken leg was obvious. The bone showed right through. We dosed it with sulfur powder and set to work with dressing and splint. The new warmth brought him to. He was in a lot of pain, so the tube of morphia was given and a little sugar to eat. But clearly he couldn't move him. A stretcher would be needed. Lahey and I discussed the situation. The time was 1:30. I left them starting to make a shelter while I made the lonely journey back to the glen as guide. I reckoned 2 hours or so to the road, and another hour to the first bite of dawn. By 3, the RAF were on their way. I heard them coming. I'd been an hour waiting by the road. Now for the business of stopping the trucks with my torch and going with them to the nearest parking point on a narrow, twisting road. By duck, the leader was one of my old mates. He told me it was their 3rd call out in 2 days. The dawn was coming up when the trucks reached the rendezvous and everyone debussed. I noticed the ambulance wasn't there. Apparently it had still been out on the last job when this lot left their base camp, so it would follow later. It suddenly struck me as we talked that this was Easter Sunday morning. Saturday seemed as if it had never existed. I was about to climb the mountain the 3rd time. The rescue parties moved on. Looking at them as an old member of a team, it seemed they were a good bunch. All types, of course. This mountaineering business in the RAF was really only a part-time job with them. Mostly they're just doing normal jobs around the air station. But if an aircraft crashes on the mountains, out they come. At times like that, they get a good deal of help from local people. So if a climber gets into trouble, the RAF comes out then to help. It's good training for them anyway. I thought, well, they get plenty of that today. We climbed more slowly towards gullies that were like solid walls of ice. There had been some new snow. The sky was leaden. I thought it would be none too soon the night before. It took 4 hours from start to reach the twisting gully. It was even more fearsome than we'd imagined it from lower down. The stretcher, light as it was, had to move in steps and stages. Everyone, despite the exertion, was feeling the almost living cold that cuts you to the quick and numbs your brain. At this height in the open hills, cold wind can kill, while down at sea level, the sun shines on a clean, color-bright morning. The ambulance was due over around 10 o'clock. I could just picture the scene. I could see a little group of onlookers watching and speculating. see one of them break away from the group and go over to the phone box. Clymer dead, boy of 19 injured, the headline would say, and the millions would discuss it in their armchairs. The lad Barry was still alive. The label round his neck had carried a note of another morphia jab. And now we faced the long haul home, down from the pinnacles, down from the gully where sheer foolishness had taken him and Ian. We were lucky to have found them. We approached the edge of the corrie to begin the steep walk down the lower slopes. Ian got it all off his chest as I helped him along. He was good stuff, this lad, the kind that could become a good climber in the right kind of company. I think he'd learned his lesson. Of his pal, I couldn't say. At least he was in good hands now. Weariness was beginning to overtake us all. Ian was now with John, and we were within sight of the road and the waiting trucks. For a while, I had only my thoughts to keep me company, my thoughts and my tiredness. I worked out I'd half climbed Everest near enough in the past 30 hours. I'd no idea how far I'd walked, and for what purpose. The hills were still my sport, no matter what would happen on them. A glorious sport with danger an inescapable part of. But walking into trouble was a fool's game. Ian had found that out, and Barry might still live to learn. The thought afforded me a little satisfaction. It had been a queer sort of holiday weekend. Of course, John and I, helping the boy Ian along between us, didn't know then all that had happened. It was Lahey who pieced it into a pattern. It was so typical, he said, of the accidents that happen every winter on the Scottish hills. And from these stories, our story was invented so that it could be told. The settings have been the real places, and the people, real people, who love mountains and regard their sport with respect. Barry lives and climbs. He and Ian are experts. but the characters they're portrayed are common enough. So, on the hills, do nothing in haste, look well to each step, and from the beginning, think well what may be the end.